Hello friends and family, welcome. I hope you're all doing well, walking into spring with that new lease of life and a new found vigour to be that radiant self that you are. So, as you know, I have been on this journey and have put into the forefront of my life my spirituality and all the different practices that have assisted me to work on myself, grow within, get to a more balanced self and a certain amount of contentment. Of course, it hasn't been easy. A lot of very major things have left my life. I've grown beyond anything I could recognise. But most of all, I've never felt so at peace and at one with who I am at the core. But that hasn't always been my song. And if you asked me this, say 3 months ago, you definitely would have heard a totally different thing. I've gone through so many different emotions as of late, but they've all happened to get me to this place of contentment. So I think me turning 50 was the culprit for all of this. We all know that saying, life begins at 50, right? They definitely need to add that tagline, and you are going to want to set on fire everything that doesn't fit anymore. And I mean everything. Something started to happen to me when I was approaching 50. To be quite honest, I did go into a little bit of a panic and oh my god, I'm turning 50. But on top of that, everything was being illuminated to me on every level at the same time, so it just felt like I was inundated with all this thing. I knew I wasn't the same person, and I knew deep down there had to be some changes in my life. I didn't want to carry on, carry things into my next chapter that I knew weren't actually working and weren't making me happy. So by choosing not to shy away from what was coming and the different emotions I was feeling meant I'd already conquered a side of me that I wasn't particularly happy with anyway. There's a real innate part of me that loves people deeply. Nothing wrong with that. But as a result of that, I tend to take what people say to me at face value. I try to give them the benefit of the doubt. Another way of looking at it is I choose to outwardly appear a bit naive when it comes to certain matters. But the conflict I was always finding myself in is the fact that my intuition is very, very strong. So I tend to see through lies and can get right down to the crux of things. Just like Leon Bridges says, I can see right through a powdered face on a painted fool. Bad news. So bringing this into my awareness, I was choosing not to go through that pain that I always felt when I realised something wasn't what it was. What I would have done previously. I faced the ish head on. And as a result, I've come out the other side, still intact, a bit sadder, a lot tougher and stronger. And obviously tolerance is at a low as well because I won't turn my eyes away from anything. Some of the emotions we attach to people, things, and once we approach them, we can deal with any situation. We can approach every situation as it can be overcome. Obviously we might feel pain initially, but like I have gone through, and I'm sure you all have at some point in your life, you've come out the other end. Mastering the self is a constant effort, and when we really go on that journey, you'll see that the attachments to things, people, even thought patterns might not necessarily be us at the present. The outcomes we desire can't take place unless we know exactly what suits us. You know, in the past you might have accepted your behaviour or other people's behaviour as just as what it is. Therefore, they don't have to change, or we don't have to change aspects of our personality. What if we chose to make excuses for those particular things that we find challenging only because we're happier to be stuck in paradigms or experiences that don't no longer suit us, rather than be honest with ourselves and just recognise them as things that are more of a hindrance than supportive of our growth? I mean, it could be a mindset, it could be a repeated response that no longer serves you, but you've not tried anything else, so that's your automatic go-to place. I was having a conversation with my daughter recently about something I knew that she wanted in her world, but she always behaved like she was indifferent about it. But I know my daughter and I could feel her pain. So I knew her energy was actually saying something completely different. She is a brave soul, but she's a very proud soul also. So I knew if I approached it from another angle, she might take the bait. She did. She eventually realised by her constantly giving mixed messages, which in turn meant her vibration was also mixed, she wasn't able to attract the type of people she wanted in her life. She realised that the conflict was within herself, and it just required that she was honest with herself and that she did really care about the particular outcome. And once she did that, she changed the belief she had for the problem. And so outwardly, the things she wanted actually started to appear. She now recognises that the one person that, we should always try to be honest with is ourselves. It's okay to have feelings that might not necessarily make her feel happy about, i.e., feeling sad or jealous. She's striving, and I really wish I had this information when I was a 15-year-old. There'd be nothing I would fear or be unable to conquer. So when I talk about self-mastering, I'm talking about the self that we associate with as the self. Another name for that self, of course, is the ego. The ego that wants to keep us safe, protected, and small, unfortunately. I mean, a lot of spiritual practices refer to death of the ego, which in my opinion, it isn't really possible. The ego serves its purpose. What is that, you might ask? The ego is the totality of our conscious self. It's how we see ourselves, or see our world, and how we interact with our world. That's a Jung view of the ego. Therefore, how can we get rid of it? That's who we are. That's us. In its entirety, obviously not at the core. I don't know why we'd want to anyway. The ego is the small part of us that is shaped by our outside influences and, how we've developed from childhood to where we are now, and have become part of our personality and our traits that are exclusively ours. I mean, there are different aspects that aren't so obvious to us, and those parts are often referred to as our shadow self. The shadow self is a whole nother subject, but for the purpose today, let's just deal with the part of ourselves that is familiar, the ego. From the psychological perspective, the ego helps us regulate certain aspects of ourselves that needs to be kept in check, the id. So when someone has a weak ego, their id runs amok, and if they have a strong ego, they can rein themselves in and keep themselves in check. Now, I'm not here to discuss the ego in terms of whose is bigger and what the right proportion is. I'm just pointing out that it is useful to have an ego. I remember years ago I tried not to have one, and doormat. We can't get rid of it regardless. You know, it's part of our personality. So back to the issue and the subject of self-mastery. I've really been on a mission to get a handle on all the things that are no longer in alignment with who I am. You know, like I said, a lot of major things happened in 2020. Did I mention that? And have caused me to go deeply on this journey. I wouldn't consider myself a person that runs from their true self and the things that I want to change. However, I know I was definitely guilty of suppressing certain emotions in order to avoid confrontation, conflict, or just simply rocking the boat. I know this isn't exclusive to me, and a lot of people can relate. I've spoken to them, they can relate to this. And that's, you know, the price you pay sometimes when you're in relationships, etc., etc. We all do it for our own reasons. But for me, I had to really confront this on a deep soul level because I felt so powerless in certain situations. I had to really look at myself and ask the question why, as a really confident woman that knew what she wanted out of life and knew who she was at the core. And, you know, I knew at the core that I was here to do something quite grand. So why was I feeling stuck and that I wasn't going to attain my goals as the person I was at the time? I knew I was going to have to go real deep into the self and relearn a lot about who I was becoming and not to leave any stone unturned. The results of my emotional overhaul was so cathartic and life-changing. I'd mastered so many parts of myself that were so familiar to me and I've held for so long, and didn't really look at the circumstances that had occurred, you know, from a long time ago that have brought me to this place. So going back and looking at childhood and things that happened in my early adolescence, I realised that these were more than likely the culprits for certain behaviour and that stuff, feeling I couldn't shake. Because for decades I couldn't seem to get out of that cycle. By investigating, I realised that who I am and who I'm becoming was always there, but under lots of layers of self-doubt, self-deception, self-betrayal, and of course a lack of self-forgiveness. We aren't the same people that we are even a day before, so how can we hold on to elements of ourselves that's happened, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago or even earlier? All we're doing by doing this is rendering ourselves helpless and powerless. Because if the situation continues to have a hold on us, you know, decades later now, how many decades later? And if it still makes us unhappy in any way, then we must still be under that disillusionment that it has some kind of power over us. We have the power to change it. But luckily, having the faith and a lifetime belief that my destiny was greater than any fear I held was what was driving me to be the change that I wanted to see. So how I perceived my world and the role that I was meant to play in it was everything to my journey. We all have to discover what our purpose is and why we're here. It will be the driver. We've all got a bigger purpose. You have to investigate, dig deep and find out who you are. By choosing to shift my perception from viewing every circumstance from a fear-based place to a gentler, soothing approach, it allowed me to dispense of any anxiety that might have ensued, or any anxiety that continues to come up when I'm trying to push forward. Also, with the use of visualization, I was able to use that to create new scenario in my mind that I didn't particularly like, which helped me to transform the situation from something that created unease in me to one that I would like to see materialize. I automatically felt more relaxed, and by feeling more relaxed I can release the fear and any pain that was attached to it really quite quickly. Visualization is such an amazing task. Once you start to do these things, you'll start to create an unwavering belief in yourself, and you'll trust the decisions you are making. There'll be no long periods of like second guessing yourself, or like calling a mate to see if they agree with you and your stance that you're taking on a particular thing. You'll be able to come to these conclusions on your own. You'll trust yourself more, especially because during this time of self-mastery, you'll recognize that there's a support system within you that's also there on your side, guiding you to a place of contentment and assurance. Don't get it twisted. During this time, it can feel like a real massive purge of loads of things. Not only will you take on a new persona, your whole outside world would also change. Certain people that you might have thought were your ride or die will no longer resonate with you, or you them. Or you might find that you're finding yourself in real deep conflicts with them quite regularly. I mean, this can happen with your girls too. I'm not talking about those one-off disagreements that you just let go of your head. I'm talking about that continuous-ish. So I always sort of think to myself, when that happens, it's the universe saying to me, as your new version of yourself, are you okay accepting this type of behaviour now that you're the newer, developed version of yourself? Obviously, some cases you can say, yes, I'm okay with this, but then there'll be those ones where you're like, it's your choice. We all have free will. But know this, by releasing what doesn't fit anymore, you are making more room for what actually does. So I am going to leave that one there, and that one bites the dust. Thanks for stopping by, sharing your ears, for all your likes, shares, and subscriptions. If you haven't subscribed, please do. I hope you come back, and yeah, namaste, my people.